Welcome to Demystifying Instructional Design, a podcast where I interview various instructional designers to figure out what instructional designers do. I'm Rebecca Hogue, your podcast host. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider subscribing or leaving a comment on the show notes blog post, and consider helping to support the podcast with a donation to my Patreon account. Welcome, Stephanie, to Demystifying Instructional Design, a podcast where I interview instructional designers to help figure out what it is instructional designers do. To begin with, can you start by introducing yourself?
Hi, my name is Stephanie Smith. I am the Learning and Design Manager for Tri-State, which is an electric utility co-op. So a very interesting part of the business to be in the energy sector at this time. And I've been in instructional design for about 16 years. And then before that, I was a teacher for 7 years. Been in the education field for quite some time at this point.
How did you get into instructional design? How did you make that transition?
Yeah, I was teaching. I had become a master teacher and I was really hitting burnout, as many do. And I was like, what is my favorite part besides the kids that I love? And that was curriculum design and building things. This was way back before I think even e-learning had its big, there was some stuff out there, but it wasn't huge. It was distance learning type of things that were out there at that time. And so I started working for the Library of Congress, doing these sort of virtual field trips and stuff of creating these experiences for students. And I used that as the base of my portfolio. And then I begged for a job. I found a company. It wasn't a great company, but I found they were hiring, and I just begged quite a few times. And then they finally gave me a chance, and I came in. I'm trying to remember all of it, but I came in and I felt really comfortable on the design side, but I really had to learn technology, where I think a lot of teachers feel that sometimes, which is funny because I tell people, I'm like, you really don't need to know the technology as well as you think you do. But I sat with people, I learned. We had a recession hit at that point. Everybody was losing their jobs. So I thought I don't have to be the best, but I better not be the worst designer. So I started reading a lot of books, really trying to just up my game as an instructional designer. I was doing a lot of e-learning and video. And I think finally my boss, who was also my mentor at the time, he's like, if you've read all of these books, why don't you just finish your master's degree? And I had read the entire curriculum for my master's degree before I ever even got there, and took the master's program. He recommended me. I got in, and I got to work with some really amazing people in our industry, like Patty Shank. She became a mentor for me as well. So it was really good. I've had two really big mentors in my career that have taken me to those next steps, those next levels both times. So it was really, really beneficial to have that.
A question for you is, how do you describe what you do? When you say, hey, I'm an instructional designer, how do you describe that to people?
So what I tell people is that we use like brain science, we use learning theory to really help people learn skills and knowledge to help further, like in the corporate world, we do that for employees. And part of that is, I'm trying to think of how I would answer that question. But I think one of the big pieces that I try and explain to people is anybody can, like a SME can put together a PowerPoint, or they can put together a training. And really where we're really beneficial is that we represent the learner, right? We are looking at what is the best way to convey this information? What is the best way for this learner to learn? We know there's not going to be a ton of retention for a 2-hour course versus smaller chunking pieces. And so we use brain science and we use learning theory, and we put together our best methods of trying to transmit that information to improve performance.
Cool. What kind of projects do you find fun?
I think in my career, I've really enjoyed when they have an actual problem and I have to really think it through and really do analysis I had one where, they came back and they're like, we have to teach this skill. It's a super important safety type of skill. And we go through this whole process of analysis. And we realize that as we're going through this analysis and talking and interviewing people on the job, that everybody was doing something different. And so we realized that there was a huge discrepancy on what was supposed to be the actual process. So I actually love projects that have a problem where I have to really be creative and think outside the box. And then I also really do love doing courses that are fun with lots of different multimedia. I love doing video. So there's a development side that I enjoy, but from that design side, I really love figuring out, hey, this is the problem. What are the nuances of the problem? And then coming up with different types of solutions that will really attack that and help.
And so what are the biggest challenges you face as an instructional designer?
I think one of the biggest ones is order taker versus consultant. A lot of instructional designers, especially newer ones, they come in and what do you want? You want a video? I'll make you a video. You want they take the order and they create the product versus really trying to get down to what is the issue, what is the problem you're solving for, and really being able to guide the customer into a solution that's going to be the best solution for a learner. And one of the things that I've always had guide me is if I wasn't willing to take my own training, then I didn't do a good job. And because it's funny, I've been a teacher, I've been a trainer, and if I can't sit through it, because I'm not a good student sometimes. And so that's one of my benchmarks. If I can't stand it, then I didn't hit it out of the park.
I totally relate to that. And when I was working in tech writing, it was the same thing. If I didn't use the stuff that I was writing as a reference, then it's not good enough. It's not solving the problem. And so that's very interesting. And I really like the order taker versus consultant analogy there, because there is so much of that, especially when people don't understand what instructional designers do. It's, oh, build this training for me. I want training for that.
Yeah, I want an e-learning course. Okay, why?
What exactly do you want it to do? Yes.
What do you think you're going to get from it? And having them get something from it, right? You want to be able to have that return on investment. And I would say in the corporate world, we don't do a great job on doing that, but I've really worked hard to try for our department to make sure that we're showing our value, right? I'm trying to advertise, hey, these are all of the things that we fixed for the company, that we did for the company. And so that's the other thing, right? In a recession, what's the first department to get killed? We don't need training. So showing your value, being a consultant. And a huge portion of that is starting a project as the lead. You've got to lead the project. You've got to guide your customer through those processes, but explain what we're doing and trying to teach them. I have, at this point, some of the people we work with, they just love it. They're like, I know you're going to handle it. You're going to guide me each step. And they really enjoy it working with us.
That's awesome. So what skills do you find most useful in your work?
I have seen very successful instructional designers in my career and not so successful. There really is a brain for it. And it's not necessarily something that you're going to learn in a program, but one of the biggest skills is managing a project. If you can't manage a project well, you will have scope creep, and you'll have a very impatient customer who's then starts changing their mind, and then you don't know what you're doing anymore. So having really good project management skills, and part of that's customer service and communication pieces of talking your way through the process. And then having this mental ability to organize and chunk content and to look at content and convert it into something that is a lot more easier to digest. For example, I might look at a participant guide, and if I see paragraph after paragraph, I'm like, I'm going to snore through it. This isn't working. How do you create graphics? How do you pop things out? How do you make it digestible? And those are some really key things. And so when I'm interviewing, we create scenario questions because I want to see how does their brain work? How do you get from A to B to C? And that's going to show me what kind of designer you are. So there is a brain to it. It's not always, hey, I can make a really great job aid or I can make a video. It really comes down to how do you organize and chunk information so that learners can consume that and be able to retain it.
What advice would you give to the new instructional designer?
My first mentor, one of the things that he had us do was we would take learning theory and then we would try and figure out how to apply it in real life. And so we would do these sort of workshop scenarios. And I will tell you that you start to really learn a learning theory that way and really think about how, if you're looking at behaviorism, how am I applying that to what I can do for my learner? And so they weren't always, a lot of them were very rhetorical and discussions, but we really tried to figure out how do you take these concepts and apply them in different mediums. So that was one of the things that I think can really help.
Do you have an example of that? Do you have one that off the top of your head?
One of the ones that I did through that process, I did the format theory, which is not actually, it's really obscure, but a teacher, I think she was a teacher, she came up with this one. But basically it combines a whole bunch of things from like Kolb's learning theory of how we perceive and internalize training, and being able to take some of that and apply, like, how do you give time to give content and then allow for processing and then communicating that content out. So that was one that we did. It's harder to do with e-learning, but it's pretty easy to do in the classroom, right? You can present content, you can allow them to then, you have to look at what is the schema of the learner. Having a learner that's somewhat familiar with the content, like if you're teaching something about dogs and you're like, oh, I love dogs, that's what the learner's brain's going to do, right? They're going to be like, I'm learning all this content about dogs. They're going to reference their memories and experience of dogs, and you're going to encode that into their schema. And then having them have a chance to think about it, to process it, and then to communicate that back, that's going to help reinforce what they're learning. And so those are some types of examples that I haven't used that one, but I should say I've used that one as an example to use, but I haven't actually got to do an amazing course about dogs. I would love that.
And so you mentioned you're a hiring manager. And so when you're hiring an instructional designer, what are you looking for?
One of the biggest pieces for me is, do they fit on my team, personality wise? And I think that's where I've seen a lot of people online very discouraged, where they're like, I didn't get this job, or I went through this whole hiring process. And sometimes it has nothing to do with your skill set. Sometimes it has to do with, how are you going to fit in with the rest of my team? Because I need you to be able to work together. Yes, there are skills, there are competencies that I am specifically looking for, but that is one of the bigger pieces of who gets hired over someone else. I recently was looking at 2 different candidates, and they were really equally strong. And one of them didn't have a strong portfolio, but you know what? She sent me emails thanking me. She followed up. I got a lot of eagerness from her. And so when I went to compare the 2, because they looked really close, I was like, I'm going to take the one who just put just a teeny bit more effort into it. And that's what I ended up going with. I know it's brutal out there, but knowing learning theory and understanding the difference between learning theory and instructional design theory, that's a big one. You should know the difference. A lot of people can't answer that question, which is really surprising in our industry. And so being able to like take a scenario, walk through it. I've hired people who said, I don't know, to a question. I can teach that. So being honest, if you don't know something, is totally fine for me as a hiring manager. And portfolios, honestly, they can help you, but they don't get you the job for me as a manager. I'm really looking at like how your resume looks, and that's going to get you in my pile of interviews, and then I'm going to see how you perform on those interviews. And then I'll probably take a look at your portfolio and see, yeah, it looks like you have those skill sets, but you're going to talk about that in your interview with me. You know, it can be a lot of things, but the portfolio doesn't make or break for the job hunt.
And what can somebody do to stand out?
And I guess that okay. I have hired somebody based on their portfolio before. And this person, he was straight out of college. He'd never had a job before. He had an amazing portfolio. I didn't believe he made it. So I called him because I didn't think he made it. And he did. And he walked me through his process, and he walked me through what he did with his portfolio, and I hired him. And I trained him on all the other stuff. But so I have hired somebody based on their portfolio. I guess I should be honest about that. But that was because he had zero experience, right? So he had an amazing portfolio, zero experience. But most of the time, I see a lot of people who have decent portfolios and some experience.
So you have a stack of resumes. What makes someone stand out over someone else?
Good. That's a good question. Okay. So things I'm looking at when you have, and you've got some of your job titles, but what I'm specifically looking at is, do you have the tasks that an instructional designer does in that list of what you did for that job? So are you managing projects and SMEs? Are you communicating with those stakeholders? Are you following the ADDIE process, doing analysis on different projects? Are you developing? Some people are not developers. There's a lot of instructional designers that just do the first analysis and design and they hand it off, right? I work in a shop where we do everything from soup to nuts. So I want to see that you go how to do everything from soup to nuts. And if you have that, then I'm usually in the yes pile. I'm gonna at least give you a chance and give you an interview.
Cool. And you mentioned that when you get to that interview, one of the things you do is scenario. Can you give an example of the types of things you ask people?
Yeah. So one of the questions I will ask is, if you had to teach the color red, how would you do that? So if your objective is describe the color red, how do you fulfill that? What would you do? What learning theories would you bring in? What would you do to teach that?
Wow. That one's got me really thinking. It's like, the color red, really? That's interesting.
In a sense, it's a little bit of a trick question, because anytime you have the word describe, what that does in instructional design is you're telling me what it is and what it isn't. I've used red, I've used an elephant or a moose. We've used all sorts of different things depending upon the interview. But we're really looking at, can you describe what it is, and can you describe what it isn't? You create learning pieces around that. And a lot of times what people do, they'll go and say, oh, I want to teach them the parts of a moose, and I want to teach them what an elephant sounds like. So they'll start to get that. And I know that's where their brain is going. And that's really the answer to the question.
I say the color red is particularly hard because there aren't parts to it. But it's funny because the thing that went to my mind are, okay, so the RGB values and the hues and all of the things that make the color red, like the prism.
Yeah, that would be a correct answer. Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Or one of the other ones is, I'll ask and I'll say, tell me about your favorite learning theory. Why do you use it a lot? What do you use it for? How do you use it? So just getting to talk about how they're applying those instructional design pieces around that. I also ask a question like, if you were going to design, you got a project to design new hire benefits. Like, you came onto the company and you have to teach a new hire about their benefits. What would you do? So things I'm looking for are getting stakeholders involved, starting with analysis. It's really an ADDIE question, right? What are the points of, and so just having them talk through that sort of scenario tells me that they understand the ADDIE process and they understand how to, but if they use SAM or if they use something else, that's fine too. I just want to see that they can apply the instructional design theory and follow up with that.
What are the biggest mistakes that people make during the interview process?
So having examples and using examples that don't fit with an adult learner. So the big red flags I have, if you start talking about, oh, I can have somebody do a crossword puzzle, what's the actual benefit of that besides busy work? You can do some vocabulary things like that.
I was going to say, I use it for vocabulary, but that's about it.
Yeah, but typically that's not going to be something and if you use that as an example, that's okay. But I've had a lot of people who who don't seem, with the examples that they use, they're not thinking about what an adult learner is. And then I know that's not going to fit with my clients, right? They're going to be like, why am I filling out a crossword puzzle? Whereas they're trying to learn. One of the things that we do at my company is we have apprenticeships. So people are coming in and it's like a college in a lot of ways. It's not to say that we don't do vocabulary with them, but that is, they're looking at pieces of machinery and how things fit together. And so you've got to think about what's going to engage an adult learner and what makes sense for them, if that makes sense. So that's usually a red flag. I also, again, I'm looking at different types of teamwork questions, or part of the interview process is it's two-sided, right? We are interviewing you to see if you fit with us, but you should be interviewing us to see if we fit for you. And I think people forget that sometimes. And part of that is I'll ask you a question like, what's your favorite part of the Addy process? Or what's your favorite things to do at work? And if it's completely different than what we do, then we know we're not probably a fit. I want you to be happy. I want you to stay and work for me for a long time and be engaged. And so I want to find somebody that's going to want to do what we do.
Oh, it makes total sense. How big is your team and what does it comprise? What types of people, or what types of, do you have, instructional designers, but do you have other trades as well?
Yes. So we have 3 instructional designers, and then I have an IT trainer. So she does some of the design work. She's like SME in-house for IT projects. And then she's also our trainer. And then I have an LMS administrator, and she also helps manage and run the apprenticeship programs that we have. I team manage, partner with our other team, which is our trades and crafts facilitators. I think there's 9 of them. So they are doing training on all the different facets of an energy company, from generation to transmission. So we have somebody who's teaching linemen how to be linemen, teaching electricians and mechanics how to operate a plant. So it's very extensive. So there's 9 of those guys. And then we also partner with the safety department. So the safety, they have, gosh, I don't know how many facilitators they have. Like, they might have up to 10. It might be like somewhere between 5 and 10. I'm not sure how many facilitators they have over there that go out and do safety teaching. And we support them. We build programs for them as well. And then we have an organizational development person. So she's looking at our leadership programs, and some of it is like change management. So some of it's that sort of big picture piece. So we partner with her. And then we have on my team, my instructional designers are they're part of a DEI committee, some leadership, different committees. So not only are they doing that, but they're also trying to be part of these bigger corporate changes that are integral to what we have to do in-house. And my team of designers, I think instructional designers, I usually have anywhere between 3 and 4. I have 4 right now. Sorry.
When you're looking at portfolios, because you mentioned you look at resumes first, but then interview and look at portfolios, what are you looking for in the portfolio? What do you want to see?
That's a good question. So the first thing I will say is I've had people submit portfolios that are locked, where I have to go in and I try and get in there, and then it contacts them to give me permission to see it. That wastes my time. So having something that is easily consumable is very important, because if I have to waste time, I'm going to go to the next person. Not to say that I won't take a look at it, and I totally understand all of the sort of IP types of issues that come with that, but make it easy for me as the hiring manager so I can see your stuff really quickly. I will say that I spend probably about 5 minutes in there. So I'm looking for examples of, do you have an e-learning project? Does it have audio? So can you do audio? Do you have a video project? Do you have a participant guide? Do you have some examples of job aids or writing? I had one person who had a portfolio where she showed this really cool interactive job aid to get started with jobs. It was something so different I'd never seen. she immediately got an interview. Like I was like, yeah, I want to talk to her because this looks cool. So if there is something really special that you've made that stands out, I know a lot of the colleges will have you do write-ups. I am skimming. I am looking for, do you have the basic development skills? Your resume should show me that you have the knowledge skills for instructional design, but can you show me that you have the development skills? Do you have a PowerPoint? I've had a hard time too where there's only RISE courses in somebody's portfolio. That's not e-learning where it's higher level e-learning branching with different types of questions and application pieces. I want to see that you can build some of that. So some of it is really just to show some examples or skills. I will even take screenshots. Like if I can just see, hey, you did build something like that, works for me. But again, I may have 20 resumes, so you get 5 minutes. So it just needs to be clean. I don't want to have to try and figure out where it is if there's a huge file structure. That happens too. So those are anything that makes it not, I might dig into something a little bit longer if I'm really interested in your stuff, but it has to have that 5-minute mark. I'm going to just skim it. And if it looks good, you're in the yes pile, that kind of thing.
You mentioned earlier that you use an LMS for your e-learning. I'm curious, which LMS?
Yeah, but right now we're using SumTotal Learn, which just got bought by Cornerstone. I actually had a job at one point where we used to sell our training, and part of my job was to get it implemented on customers' learning management systems. So I ended up learning a ton about learning management systems, and it's really funny because they're a dime a dozen. Some of them work great. You have to know what do you need it for, and then usually you can find a product that's going to meet that. So SumTotal, it looks good on the user end. At the back end, it's a lot of work, but it meets the needs for what our company needed at the time.
I'm running out of questions. I'm wondering if there's any question you want me to ask.
I see a lot of people wanting to transition into instructional design. And then there's a lot of debates about whether you have a master's degree or you do a certification. I went the master's degree route for myself. I actually did my program prepare me for everything? No. But it took me to that next level. It did bring me where it built, I would say, some confidence, but it also took me into, I would say that it took me to that senior level of design, if that makes sense. I will look at people who have a certification. I know there's a lot of great programs. There's not so great programs, but I will say a master's holds a lot more weight for me as a hiring manager, just because I feel like you get a lot more of design theory and you get a lot more skills. And I know some people come out and they're like, I don't know how to do Articulate, or I don't know how to do Captivate. Those are easy. Don't worry. I'll teach you that stuff on the job. But having a good understanding of adult learning theory and having a good understanding of how to apply learning theory and how to think through. I remember doing a capstone project where I was running my own business. And I thought at the time, I go, I'm never going to need this. I'm always going to work for someone else. And I ended up having a consulting side business. And I used that. I took the stuff that I used from there and I was able to apply it. And then I felt a little bit better. Okay, I could work for myself if I wanted to, but I like being in the corporate sphere as much as I enjoyed the consulting piece, but that's where I really liked being.
Yeah. Everyone has their preference, right?
They do. And one of my employees, she was on her way to be a college professor, and she's an amazing designer. She's so talented, and I really want to keep her. So as a manager, I have to really work hard at that. But I wouldn't say that there's a waste with having a master's degree. That being said, if you're a teacher and you're transitioning and it's not in instructional technologies, that's okay. Because I think if you have anything in that sort of realm, whether that's like leadership, organizational development, I think all of those kind of feed together I usually flag those first. And then the other big one that people miss, they think that instructional technologies means like they're learning the tech side of instruction, and it's actually the science of instruction. And I think that's really funny that a lot of people miss that one, or they'll misuse it. And I'm like, that's not totally what that means, but that's okay.
Yes. Yeah. We get a lot of the, oh, do you know articulate? Or will I be learning articulate? Or will I be learning captivate? I'm like, sure, I'll teach H5P, though it's free, but it doesn't really matter which one, as long as you know how to apply it in the right context.
And the funny part is technology just keeps getting easier. So back in my day, when I first started e-learning, we had to code by hand in these like Excel sheets to get the XML file to work. Old school. And then now I'm on my phone and I can click on my kids' picture and it pops out the background. And I'm like, you don't even need Photoshop anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's funny because when I started out, I would storyboard. And so my first job as an instructional designer was actually writing storyboards that we then handed to programmers who would create the Flash interactions. And an interaction was a page flip. It was considered interactive if you had to click next. And then it's like, yeah, wow, we've come a long way.
We have come a long way. Yeah. And I still look at projects, and we have that on our team. We'll have some stuff that we know we're going to do at a cheaper level. It's probably going to be slideshow, next button with a quiz at the end, versus something. We have one that's for our cybersecurity program that is scenario based instead of talking head based. So it puts you in a virtual environment and you have to make decisions for cybersecurity, and then it teaches you as you go. So that's a very high level, high design type of course. Our people loved it.
Oh, yeah.
It's on it because they're like, there's no talking person.
People actually learn.
Yeah. And then our cybersecurity team, we have video. So if they do something, then they'll pop up and then they'll tell them, but it's their own people that they work with. So it's a great course. So I'm pretty proud of my team for that one. So yeah, we go the gambit, and understanding as you go through your career, you will have an understanding of cost versus, sometimes we build things cheap, sometimes we don't. But even understanding the cost of instructor-led versus e-learning, right? E-learning is very expensive up front, but you don't have to bring in your people from all over the country to take a course, but sometimes that's needed. So understanding the cost of things, I think that's something, as you go through your career, you'll start to really understand, but that's not necessarily something we focus and teach on early on.
So the last question I have, which I ask everybody, is what's your prediction for the future of instructional design?
I think we're already seeing it. It's learning in the moment. And this is really interesting. So my company right now is converting to Oracle, and Oracle has a program called Oracle Guided Learning. And it is basically like Articulate or Captivate that's embedded into their program. So my designers, and we have a meeting coming up. We thought, oh, we're going to build job aids and we're going to do this. And then we got this tool and I went, we have to rethink everything we're doing. What needs to pop out and what needs to tell them how to do something while they're doing it. So to me, and that comes into, you can't front load training anymore. You've got to do it while they need it. That's when it's most meaningful. That's when they're going to remember it. So I think we saw that with the sort of the MOOC movement, these small bite-sized pieces. But now I think it's going to be like, what can we put into MS Teams? What can we put into, it's almost like the reliving Clippy that would come up and tell you it's not dumb. But I think that's really where it's going to be when I need it, just on demand, easily consumable pieces. I think that's really where we're heading.
Performance support.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really, in the corporate world, that's really a big trend.
Yeah. Not to say that people are, and I'm always surprised, there's a lot of people, adult learners, who love podcasts, who love TED Talks, who do books. And so you still have people consuming some of these sort of bigger mediums, or longer, I should say, for an attention span. But I do think that that's one of the biggest directions we're seeing on the corporate side.
Cool. Thank you very much. This has been really insightful, actually, really great. Yeah. So thank you for being a guest on Demystifying Instructional Design.
Thank you. It was great. I'm so glad to help out and help guide people as they come in. And this is it's a wonderful field. I love this field. Makes me happy to go to work.
You've been listening to Demystifying Instructional Design, a podcast where I interview instructional designers about what they do. I'm Rebecca Hogue, your podcast host. Show notes are posted as a blog post on demystifyinginstructionaldesign.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe or leave a comment in the show notes blog post.